Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Nonprofit Learning Lab for today's workshop. If you have any questions along the way for our presenters, you can type them into your questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel, likely on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any tech-related questions, you can also type them there. We will be sending out the recording and materials from today's workshop by the end of the day tomorrow, so please keep an eye out for that email. And without further ado, I will now hand it over to Carole and Matt.
Thank you, Monica. Well, good morning or good afternoon, since we are broadcasting across many time zones, and welcome to Protect Your Nonprofit from Financial Fraud. Matt and I will be co-presenting from, I will be presenting from the financial perspective, and Matt will be giving the IT perspective on everything that you need to know to protect your nonprofit from financial fraud. Our learning objectives for today are as follows. We're going to discuss the cybersecurity landscape and the particular vulnerabilities for nonprofit organizations. We will then share tips and best practices for financial processes and IT tools to help prevent and detect fraudulent activity. And lastly, we'll identify and define the types of cybersecurity incidents and give examples of the different types. Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Glad to be joining you to talk about this topic today. My name is Matthew Eshelman, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Community IT. In my role as the Chief Technology Officer, I'm really focused on shaping the technology strategy and platforms that we use to support our 6,000 nonprofit staff clients across 150 different organizations, and with a special focus on the cybersecurity controls that we use to keep our organizations safe. So if you're not familiar with Community IT, just a little bit more about us. So Community IT is a 100% employee-owned managed services provider. So we provide outsourced IT support, and we work exclusively with nonprofit organizations. And our mission is really to help nonprofits accomplish their mission through the effective use of technology. We serve nonprofits throughout the US and have been doing this for over 20 years. And we're technology experts and have consistently been named a top 501 MSP. And that's a recognition that we've received again last year. So it's great to join you and share the lessons learned that we've developed over time. Carole?
Thanks, Matt. So I'm a senior manager and market leader for your part-time Controller's Washington, D.C. office. I began my career as an auditor for Deloitte, and my combined nonprofit experience includes more than 20 years of accounting, auditing, and audit management, budgeting, and best practices in nonprofits, as well as board administration, including serving as a CFO for several nonprofit organizations, one of which was I was a client of YPTC. Now I'm on the other side, and in my current position at YPTC, I'm the manager and market leader for DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I facilitate relationships with clients and staff, conduct practice development. I also provide accounting, reporting, and management services to nonprofit clients myself. I'm a member of the AICPA and the Greater Washington Society of CPAs, and I serve as a member of the GWSCPA nonprofit section. And a little bit about YPTC. Your part-time controller is a professional services firm that specializes in nonprofit financial management with nearly 30 years of nonprofit expertise. In 2023, we'll be celebrating 30 years. Our services include accounting, financial reporting, data visualization, and best practices, to name just a few. We have over 1,200 clients currently located throughout the US, as well as clients in several other countries. We are a staff of over 400 and growing, working in our 8 regional offices and in our YPTC Anywhere nationwide virtual office, serving clients both on-site and remotely, and providing services nationwide. We're very proud to be voted a best place to work for over a decade, and in 2021, we were named on Accounting Today's list of best accounting firms to work for. YPTC is often hired by nonprofits for a variety of reasons. and nonprofit may not be large enough or have a budget sufficient to support a full-time in-house controller or CFO. So they engage us, it's in our name. Alternatively, a nonprofit may have a staffing vacancy and they'll hire YPTC to fill in that gap until a new controller or CFO is hired. Thirdly, we may be hired because a board member or executive director is being proactive about having third-party oversight over their financial reporting. And lastly, we may also be brought in after a fraud to help clean up a mess and help implement better accounting policies and procedures, including fraud prevention and good internal controls, which brings us to this topic today. Matt?
Great. Well, we've told you all a lot about us, and now we like to get a little bit better sense of who is joining us here today. So we'll pop up a poll here where you can just fill in your checkbox here in terms of your role at the organization. Are you part of the IT department, finance, operations, admin, maybe others? So just take a minute to respond to that poll. We'll reflect that back out here after it's open for a few minutes. All right, if we've got a good number of respondents, we can share those results here. Let's see, a little operations. So it looks like a lot of operations folks and finance folks. And so again, I think you'll be well served by the content that we have today, as it's, this area of financial fraud is, I think, interesting as it intersects both, finance and IT. It's not, owned by one or the other, but I think a shared responsibility. So I think you'll find something to take away here. Great. Well, let's go back and start moving into the bulk of the presentation. I always like to start these sessions with a little bit of background just to help us gain an understanding of the cybersecurity landscape that we find ourselves operating in today. So as a managed service provider, we support about 6,000 users, and we have a unique perspective on the cyber attacks that are facing nonprofit organizations today. And what we're seeing is that there are persistent and ongoing what are called brute force attacks against your digital identity. The move to the cloud has been, I think, a really great thing for organizations to do, and it's made it easy for you to log into your systems no matter where you're at. But it also means that bad guys can do that too. And so whenever we look at the systems that we monitor and manage, we can just see that there's kind of a constant door knocking where bad guys are looking to break into accounts that maybe have weak or using stolen credentials. We also see that there's sophisticated spear phishing, where these threat actors will use unique knowledge about you or your organization in order to try to get you to click on a link or take some sort of action. We also see organizations that are targeted because of the work that they do. This applies particularly to policy organizations or organizations that are kind of adjacent to government. They tend to attract a higher degree of attention than others. And then there's also schemes that are targeting vendors, such as managed service providers, and as a way to get into other targets. We also know that organizations are not always aware of all the security tools that are available to them. We've been on a campaign to deploy kind of more and sophisticated tools to protect organizations against all of these threats, and we can see from our metrics that they are effective and make an impact. And we recognize that nonprofit organizations have a lot of work to do related to the policies that they need to develop, such as an incident response plan. N10, which is an organization that does a lot of work around tech, did a survey a few years ago, and they identified about 68% of nonprofit organizations didn't have an incident response plan. And that incident response plan really helps an organization define what they're going to do when something bad happens, because breaches can be significantly be a significant expense. In fact, we see that the average breach for a small business is about $149,000. So again, it doesn't grab the headlines, maybe like $1 million breach like we see in the news, but that's still a significant impact. So I don't care if you have some additional perspective on those attacks that are that are targeting nonprofit organizations.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Matt. We know that nonprofits can be particularly attractive targets for fraudsters for a number of reasons. The executive directors that we work with, they're very passionate folks. So, they're passionate about their missions. They're often naturally trusting of others. We see board members and executives who are dedicated and talented in their particular fields, but they may not necessarily be well versed in financial issues and in internal controls. So nonprofits are particularly vulnerable because they think it will never happen to them. And with often limited budget and staffing resources available, cybersecurity may be low on a long list of competing priorities. And they may not be investing in that latest cybersecurity tool or fraud controls. Another key vulnerability is that many nonprofits handle sensitive information, as you said, which may include donor information. We see most recently refugee registration data, health data, information on human rights investigations, and other highly confidential matters. And these fraudsters know that many nonprofits lack the resources to modernize their technology, making them easy targets for attack. And cyber criminals, they don't give immunity to an organization because of its charitable mission. It's all about opportunity. If the opportunity is there, they will exploit the organization. And often the nonprofit, it may take them less time and effort and result in a quicker payout than a larger corporation. And so we also understand that cyber criminals often use these chaotic times to find vulnerabilities in systems, which is why understanding the current cybersecurity landscape that we're talking about today is really crucial. Early on in the pandemic, we did see one case with one of our clients who a large nonprofit that was scammed out of nearly $1 million in a cyber attack, at a time when they were serving more people than ever because of the pandemic. But we know that, even $149,000 could potentially be devastating to many nonprofits, as Matt said.
So that financial information that Carole referred to is, a primary driver of these cybercrime statistics. So the FBI maintains the Internet Crime Complaint Center. So that's IC3. You may see that referenced elsewhere. So if you or an organization that has been a victim of cybercrime, they may have filled out a form to submit that information to the IC3 Complaint Center. And we can see here that the amount of financial loss, and this is direct loss, this doesn't even count, kind of lost productivity or lost opportunity, but kind of direct financial loss associated with cybercrime, has really risen dramatically from, $1.5 billion when they first started capturing these metrics back in 2016, all the way up to $4.2 billion in 2020. So the kind of the pace and the volume of cyber attacks and the financial impact of those cyber crimes, is really significant, and it's only growing over time, unfortunately. So I think it's, as part of understanding the cyber landscape, I think it is important to understand that, our stereotypical view of hackers, it's no longer, some kid in the basement or, a Nigerian prince prone to misspelled names or just kind of this faceless bot army, but cybercrime is a job. It's a living. And so the people on the other end, there are people on the other end of the computers that are launching these phishing campaigns, handling these spear phishing engagements, interacting with people once they've started a relationship. And they're doing it because there's a financial incentive. As we can see from the FBI data, there are billions of dollars that are being lost to these cyber criminals. And I think from the cybercrime perspective, it's a lot easier to try to scam somebody out of, $100,000 or get them to buy gift cards than it is to, write a sophisticated virus to wreck a network. So there's a financial motivation behind that that doesn't really take into account, you know, an organization's mission or how much good that they're doing in the world. So having an understanding of that cyber crime and the fact that these are financially motivated attacks, I think can help provide some additional perspective in terms of how we need to respond and prepare our organizations to defend against these threats. So again, to get a little bit of a better sense of the audience and what you have all experienced, is I'd like to take this time to do another poll and get a sense if your organization has experienced any of the following, if it's, you know, phishing or account compromise, any type of like malware, virus information, wire fraud. So that would be when an organization has actually had a financial loss that occurred over electronic means. So again, you could have bought a gift card or even had a wire transfer gone to a different bank account. Organizations, you know, ransomware gets a lot of press, and it does happen, and it happens with unfortunate regularity, but that's when your data becomes encrypted and the hacker wants you to pay some sort of ransom, often in a cryptocurrency, in order to get it back. And then you might be an organization that is targeted by one of these so-called advanced persistent threat actors. And so those are entities that are often sponsored by a state, Russia, China, North Korea, and they're really interested in kind of maintaining access and persistence into a network, particularly those organizations that are working on policy. So take a minute to respond, and we'll see what folks' experience has been related to that. So if we got the results, we can share that. So almost 100% phishing and account compromise, and yes, I think that echoes what we've seen as well. So we can move on and seeing the internet crime complaint stats, and in fact, you know, phishing, smishing, farming, those are all email and kind of text message based attacks. That is the number that's increasing. So 2020 data is on the left in the light blue line, and because there's cybercrime, there's a real financial motivation behind these attacks. And we even see that in our own data. So, you know, it's Community IT, we support about 150 different organizations, and we've seen an increase of almost 300% in security incidents from 2018 when we first started categorizing data to 2021. It's also seen in larger industry reports. This is from the Verizon Data Breach Incident Report, where they are looking at the likelihood that an organization is going to receive a malicious email, which is in that green line. So we can see that basically if you're an organization of any size, you're almost guaranteed to receive a malicious email. And then, you know, larger organizations are somebody's going to install a malicious app on their phone. And so that's the blue line. So we can see that you know, almost every organization is going to be targeted and will continue to be targeted by these email-based attacks over time. So I'd like to turn it over to Carole to talk a little bit more specifically about the risks associated with processing and managing financial transactions.
Right. So as we discussed earlier, the two main reasons that nonprofits are ideal targets for hackers and cyber criminals is they don't see themselves as target and prepare adequately, and cyber criminals view nonprofits as easy prey, sitting on a wealth of personal information about their support staff, donors, and the communities that they serve. So if your nonprofit does any of the following: process donations, online event registrations, storing personal information for program participants, collecting information on donors or newsletter subscribers, or initiating online vendor payments, then you are at risk, of course, for cybersecurity threats. We know that one of the biggest cybersecurity risks is our online donations. And while technology has made it much easier for nonprofits and charitable organizations to accept donations online, it's also, as Matt said, made it that much simpler for fraudsters to steal from the organization. The payment is easy for the donor as well, but it could leave you open. So donor records, confidential details about employees are all at risk. And we know that for many years, most nonprofits have spent very little on cybersecurity, and we are definitely seeing that that change. Part of that was due to a lack of funds, also sort of out of a sense that businesses would be more likely targets. And we've really seen, especially since 2020, one of the large nonprofit third-party vendors was affected. And before, a lot of nonprofits said it's a nice to have cybersecurity, but really now it's a must-have. And for most nonprofits, reputation is everything. If an organization suffers a breach because it was careless with data, you may lose donors and put at risk your ability to to continue to raise money and fulfill your mission. So it's very, very important to understand then what are the data protection laws that you must adhere to. So in general, these laws require the businesses who maintain this kind of personal information to have proper safeguards in place to protect personal information, and then also have protocols in place to notify individuals if a data breach occurs. There is no one all-encompassing federal data privacy law like there is for health information with HIPAA, but every state has different data breach legislation. And so you need to understand what that is that applies to personal information for residents of the state that you are in. And then even if a business does not have a physical presence in a particular state, if it is collecting personal information about a resident, and we know a lot of our nonprofits have donors, all across the country, it also has to comply with that state's laws where that individual resides. So you may need to do more research about other states as well. So what can you do? Using encryption and a secure website is definitely going to help protect information during these online type of financial transactions. And I'll turn it back to you, Matt.
Great, thank you for that. And yeah, so let's just talk a little bit more specifically about the types of cybersecurity incidents that you may encounter. And so we've got those phishing emails, compromised emails, typo squatting, and kind of a long con or that kind of business email compromise attacks. So again, this is some resources that are provided by the FBI. The FBI is actively involved as a law enforcement agency in cybercrime, and this is a graphic that they have put out. It is a little bit hard to see, but essentially they're describing the process that these fraudsters or threat actors are going to in terms of engaging with users as a way to facilitate wire fraud or other financial fraud. So again, they're typically what we see is that they're identifying a target. They will establish an engagement or an email thread that may be supplemented by phone calls. And so we'll actually see some examples of that later on. And then they may go through a process to exchange updated banking information due to some problem, and then initiate that financial transaction. So again, that is typically the flow of how these things go in terms of financial fraud that is initiated over email. And we'll take a look at a couple of examples here a little bit later on in the presentation.
Okay. So in our practice, we've seen a couple of these phishing scams. We know 75% from the poll have experienced this. So we're going to walk through, sort of what we have seen happen. So we know that, these scammers try to capitalize on a crisis, and the global pandemic, of course, is no exception. And what we are seeing are these phishing scams where they're reaching out to you and trying to trick you into giving you your personal information, such as bank account numbers, passwords, and credit card numbers. And we also know, in particular with nonprofits, we're seeing, nonprofits are communicating with their donors and partner organizations all of the time. And it's, so much easier now. There are all of these automated emails and newsletters that keep all the interested parties aware of what's going on in the nonprofit organization. But of course, as you're responding to emails, you could be putting the organization at risk. Clicking a bad link, downloading what seems to be, a safe Word or PDF document, could put your hard-earned fundraising dollars at risk. And so, what these scammers do to make their request appear legitimate is they use details and information specific to the nonprofit from information that they may have obtained from your email or newsletter or elsewhere. In the case that I mentioned earlier with this large nonprofit, this particular organization was nearing completion of its $12 million construction project, very visible to the public. In a urban setting, and the thieves knew that was going on, infiltrated their computer systems through a phishing scam, and then they put in controls that blocked legitimate emails from the construction vendor, prevented those from getting through. And then the final step was the spoofing email that mimicked an invoice from that construction company, which the nonprofit was expecting, and it looked real, and they paid it to the tune of almost $1 million. In other organizations, we've seen cyber thieves infiltrate the email server and create fake invoices, such as that. We also have seen them impersonate a current valid employee and ask for change in direct deposit, to their the scammer's bank account. So, without sufficient training, employees fall for these schemes. And of course, we have to remember it's not just employees, but also think about your volunteers. If you have volunteers, of course, most of them have good intentions, but there may be, a bad guy who is using that volunteer opportunity to infiltrate, and you may be leaving your organization at risk for cyber attack with that. So with these, practices, we always want to advise that, never send money or a wire transfer, that those are just impossible to get back without some sort of verbal or visual verification. Picking up the phone, visually talking to someone on Zoom that is a known person. And we've seen a lot of other creative examples. We've seen thieves posing as Health and Human Services employees and offering, in the last year, to put people on a vaccine waiting list, offering to ship and sell different vaccine doses, falsifying invoices of sales of COVID-19 equipment. And, and previous to that, all the stories that we heard over the last 2 years about misuse of PPP loan money. So all kinds of opportunities there. Okay, sorry. And here is an example of a phishing scheme message. It may look like it comes from a company that you know or trust. It may come from a vendor or a bank or a credit card company, a social networking site, or some sort of online payment website or app or an online store that you know or trust, and it looks very real. They've gotten quite sophisticated, and often there is, you know, some sort of a story that they tell to trick you into clicking on the link or opening the attachment, you know, saying they've noticed some suspicious activity or claim there's some sort of problem with the payment information, or with our client, you know, saying that they needed to change the banking information, and there was a whole story that, you know, went why they needed to do that. You know, it might include the fake invoice, as it was in the example that I talked about, or, you know, offer you something free. And one of the things that we've been doing a lot to help our clients with this is, you know, using a bill pay process, which has a lot of built-in internal controls that can help catch this type of con. A lot of our clients use bill.com. That's just one of the many bill pay options that does offer, you know, that extra internal control protection. And okay. Sorry, I just lost my place for a second. Okay, so we, you know, we know that to help prevent and detect, we have to understand that, first of all, you know, we're dealing with people. Humans are involved, and one of the first ways that we can prevent and detect is right from the top, promote an environment of healthy skepticism. Make sure that you're empowering employees to ask questions and not feel rushed or pressured to process payments. You know, make sure they're taking their time to hover over links and look closely at the sender's email address for misspellings. We often, you know, suggest use forward instead of just reply, so you're forced to type in a known email address. You know, don't click on the links. Don't return calls to an unfamiliar phone number. Make sure that you look at a trusted outside source, reliable source for that company phone number. And definitely before you're transferring funds or making a change to banking information, you know, make a phone call and confirm with someone that you know. The client that I talked about earlier, we implemented bill.com after that incident, and some of the other steps that we put in place, we used payment instructions that were included in an original contract to set up vendor payment. And any change from that bank information in that original contract needed to be independently verified and approved by both the CFO and the program manager. We said, you know, said verify using that pre-established phone call or a video chat. We also have seen some of our clients using a small test deposit, you know, for $1 for new vendors to verify that it is that known vendor contact. And if you're doing a wire, and you know, create a wire template for vendors with recurring invoices. And again, any change to that wire template, you know, needs to be reviewed and verified by the CFO. And of course, you know, limit the use of domestic wires anyways. You know, if you're processing all of payments through, you know, a bill pay system, you're going to have that extra prevention and also detection.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I think all of those controls just to have in place for any changes, because I think that's what we'll take a look at, you know, here is, you know, kind of the example of how these email threads, you know, kind of get carried out.
Right, and Matt, I know that attacks where global businesses are affected through the contractors, that has definitely become a clear trend. We know that business data is typically distributed across multiple third parties, including service providers, partners, suppliers, and subsidiaries. And so organizations need to consider not only the cybersecurity risks affecting their IT infrastructure, but those that come from outside it as well.
Great. Well, we can take a minute for an incident that we investigated, and here we have a screen capture from an organization that emailed their funder about updates to payment information, and let's see how we got here and what happened. So I'm actually going to flip over, and we will take a look at the actual email thread, and so some of these things may be seem familiar to you. So originally, we have some information here from the executive director. Their domain was compromised, so they had a compromised account or accounts, and so the bad guys were there. And so the organization was following up with their foundation and the foundation assistant to get some additional information about the invoice for their funding. So we can see some back and forth from the foundation back to the organization that was compromised. From the executive assistant at the compromised domain, we see some communication, apologizing for the delay in processing. That's often a tip-off that we see, right? There's a problem with our bank account. We've had some suspicious activity. We need to provide you with some new information. So that often is a clue that something is happening. Again, some back and forth, apologizing for the delay, trying to find time on the schedule. That's always a key issue for many organizations. Again, some tells here. We have recently made some changes to our payment information. Kindly disregard the previous information. Again, pointing to some of those controls that Carole mentioned before in terms of how do you establish a flow to approve changes to payment information that are different. And here we can see that both the executive assistant account and executive director account, they're both compromised and they're both interacting with their foundation in order to kind of perpetrate this fraud. So again, the foundation has some controls in place. They need a name and contact information to sign out, to send the new DocuSign information. The hacker actually created a new account on the compromised domain and assigned it, gave it a name, right? Angela Bergdorf, that's who's the person who is now controlled by the hacker completely. So now the hacker has kind of moved off of the staff account into an account that they control solely. The foundation has some controls where they need to do some call information. The hacker replies back with the ACH information, provides a phone number to verify. Again, there's problems with the phone, and as Carole mentioned, having those pre-established controls in place so that you have a number on file to call instead of just calling a number that an account provides you is a good practice, so that you have a good verified phone number to have communication on instead of relying on what could be a fraudster providing you a number that's controlled by them. And here we even have problems with the foundation. Like, they were having tech issues too, and so there was some back and forth. And here we go, the hacker gives them an updated number. They go back and forth. They're trying to, negotiate these terms. You can kind of see the hacker is getting feeling like they're almost have a big score. They can almost taste it, because they are providing both an office landline and a mobile phone in the US to provide. So again, this is an organization, I think, that was based in London. And so they're doing the follow-up. The foundation received that confirmation of the updated information, and we can see the hackers following up to ask when they're going to get paid. When are they going to get paid? When are they going to get paid? You know, so there's some urgency there. And then finally, we can see from the managing director at the foundation, it ran into some of their financial controls to say, hey, this is a fraudulent account that was provided. We have recalled the payment, and they were, you know, basically suspended at that time, and kind of the ruse was up. But you can see that there was a long conversation. There was an email provided for the accounts payable person. There was phone number verification that was provided by the hacker. And so all of these different steps were, you know, a relatively well-constructed ruse for this fraudster to take over an account at a legitimate organization and then try to perpetrate fraud against the foundation that was, you know, expecting to make a payment to that organization. So that was one example where we have a compromised account of an existing organization. And then this is an example of what is called typo squatting. So with typo squatting, I'd love, you know, for you all to, if you want to chat in and let me know which of these 3 domain names are illegitimate. So there are 3 valid domain names, and then there are actually 3 domain names here that were established by some hackers. So you want to chat in. I'd love to see if anybody can identify what the fake domains were. So we've got Grameen Kota, we've got ID First Bank, we've got Phoenix Legal. This one is very, I think, very interesting and very tricky to uncover. So here we see that in this case, the fraudsters really planned out their attack in great detail, and this was actually an attack that would have been an 8-figure haul if they had been successful. So in this example that we'll talk about, there's multiple exploits, a compromise of some internal accounts, which gave the hacker insight into when and how to attack. And we can see that they set up domains that were very similar. So Grameen Kota, there's an extra O, ID First Bank, let's see, we're missing an I in that second one, and then Phoenix Legal, they simply registered a domain name in India instead of the Netherlands. So there's lots of care and attention that was put into this, and we can see that the payoff would have been 8 figures. So again, we've got those examples of a very sophisticated attack for this. So again, we can see from IDFC First Bank, which is the fake account that was set up, to Grameen Kota, which is the legitimate organization, also mixed in with Grameen Kuta, which was the, actually I need to go back, and I think it's Grameen Kota is the legitimate one. So you can see it's very, very tricky to kind of determine, and so there's lots of different elements here. Again, the same pattern where we see the previous bank account information is unavailable. We need to provide some updated information so that you can, update your payment information so we can complete the transaction. So again, very sophisticated attack in order to achieve a financial gain here. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about those tools and techniques that organizations can put in place to help prevent this type of fraud from being successful. I think it's important for organizations that the tone needs to come from the top. So the executive leadership needs to kind of say that this is important. The staff training that can be involved needs to also be advocated from the very top levels of the organization. And then internal controls need to be well communicated so that the staff know what to do and how to do it. And then finally, implementing technical controls such as multi-factor authentication, maybe those advanced email protection tools, and even basic things like making sure that your computer is up to date so that you aren't susceptible to viruses are all good steps to make sure are in place at your organization. So I'm gonna have Carole talk a little bit more detail about some of the financial practices to put in place.
Thanks, Matt. And that first one, it's the same as the IT. The IT tool is the same as the financial tool. So we know fraud happens. So, what are some things that we can do? The best way to protect against cybercrime, as Matt just said, is that heightened awareness. And it's really establishing that awareness at every level of the organization. It has to come from the top, but it has to infiltrate at every level. It's not just the job of IT or finance or a combination. It's everyone needs to be involved in trying to protect the organization from fraud. And it's an ever evolving landscape, cybersecurity landscape. So we know that your people are the best defense against a cyber incident. So, but you do also need to understand that there will be conflict between the ease of use and the cybersecurity. So for instance, multi-factor authentication that Matt mentioned, it adds steps, right? So educate your team on why are we doing this, and help them overcome that hurdle and embrace the cybersecurity efforts to ensure the mission's continuity and security, and then be able to explain that in turn to donors and funders. You want to understand the high-risk areas, assess and test, audit your current IT infrastructure, where are you currently, what do you have to protect, where are weaknesses, what can you do about them, and that will help you gain visibility over what's happening, so you can design a roadmap for where you want to be and how to get there. And then lastly, you need to have policies and procedures, and then not just have them, but enforce them. So on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about two issues of cybersecurity preparedness, or two things that you need to have. One is that privacy policy. What personal info is collected and how is that information used. There are lots of great examples of privacy policy out there. I know Charity Navigator has one, and I think the Nonprofit Learning Lab also in their library. So know what personal info is collected and how it's used. The other thing you want to have is a data breach response plan. So typical things that you might see in a data breach response plan are reporting protocols, response team roles and responsibility. Who is that team of experts that you're going to assemble? How are you going to secure physical areas? What's your communication strategy to all the different stakeholders? Do you have legal support in place should a breach occur? What is your cyber breach insurance? Make sure that you understand that you have the proper coverage you need, and then also what is the plan to notify law enforcement. So what do you do if fraud is detected? We recommend that you develop a policy and procedure to guide employees on the proper steps to take. So you should have, the development of a fraud work plan for investigating, for communication, for limiting access to assets. So, the first thing you may want to do is hold that emergency board meeting, and investigate further. What we need to collect all the pertinent info. We know that fraudsters rarely restrict activities to just one method. There may be, other things that they're doing. So you want to block access to accounts to prevent further loss, close the bank accounts, submit the claim to recover lost money, assemble that team. And as a nonprofit, public relations is really important. You may want to, show integrity and come clean if there has been a significant breach. Don't wait to report it on the Form 990, that nonprofit that I mentioned before with the $1 million construction issue. They issued a statement on their website about it, and they posted it, the information in their 990, their annual tax return. And so you want to, make sure that you have a plan and fully understand that. And also, training for employees. It's not just training, but then it's also retraining. You want to, change those behaviors to reduce vulnerabilities and build that resistance to fraud. We know that the only thing worse than a data breach is multiple data breaches. So, here we have a fraud prevention toolkit for you. And this is not just cybersecurity, but sort of all of fraud prevention. And, these are the three areas that you can focus on to reduce risk. So as we said, one of the most important tools in your toolkit is that healthy dose of professional skepticism. Make sure you are, asking questions and demanding accountability. If something doesn't seem right, keep asking questions until you really, understand. Oversight starts with the board. And that tone at the top that we've talked about, if it is understood that it is important at the top, that message that we are paying attention is going to come through. We always say make sure that you hire the right people, right from the beginning. People that are put in positions of trust and authority, there may be extra steps that you want to go through when you're hiring those folks. Doing a complete background investigation and, go that added step and ask for individuals' consent if you need that enhanced background check for personal financial situations, as well as the criminal records. In any kind of fraud case, whether it's cybersecurity or the good old-fashioned financial fraud, making sure that policies and procedures are well documented, and that everyone is aware of what those internal controls are, and that they're enforced. And the other thing you need to do is make sure that you're constantly reviewing them for changes in situations with with the switch to remote work. If you haven't already, make sure that you are going back and reviewing all those policies and procedures and updating them for, the different ways that we are handling payments. And, and then the other, that's all the tone at the top. Segregation of duties, of course, is really important. This first one, the daily review of online bank balances and monthly reconciliations, we make that recommendation for all of our clients. And you should always be doing this to make sure that there aren't any bank errors, but especially in this time of cybersecurity, we have clients who actually were able to, with this daily review of the online bank balances, identify and find fraud and stop it before it was too late. So that is just a critical step or a critical tool in your toolkit that's easy, doesn't cost anything. So have, whether it's the executive director or maybe it's the COO reviewing that. And of course, having all, the checks and balances, having the board look at things that the executive director is approving. And then in terms of policies and procedures, again, make sure that you have, the cybersecurity insurance, also the D&O, the directors and officers liability insurance, and the cybersecurity training. It's not just, an annual thing, it's ongoing and constant and keeping everyone on their toes. And of course, just having good practices where there is a 990 review and an annual audit will also help with fraud protection. And the no organizational credit cards, we know that's an area that is very rife for fraud. So that's, if you can eliminate those, you're eliminating a big risk of fraud. So go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just saying, I think it's really a comprehensive list, and the no organizational credit cards is an interesting note to see there. I know we're getting near the end of our time, and so I wanted to quickly, add some IT security best practices. Carole's already talked about the importance of training, and I think training covers a wide variety of things, from security awareness to make sure those emails are not being clicked, to some of those financial practices and making sure staff are educated in how that needs to be executed. We know that security awareness training is effective. We're a KnowBe4 partner, and this is some of the statistics that they share. So for organizations, SMB nonprofits, they see baseline phishing tests where almost 40% of people are clicking on those links that come through in messages. But after about a year of training time, that number really falls down into the low single digits, and that really does mirror our experience whenever we are deploying security awareness training to new organizations. And our approach is to have that main annual training that everybody goes through, but also supplements that with quarterly micro trainings, because security awareness training is something that really should be built into the culture of the organization and be done throughout, and not something that you just do kind of once a year because you have to. Along with security awareness training, there are some important technical things that your organization should be doing. And the number one thing would be multi-factor authentication. And so that combines something that which is your password, along with something you have, which is often a token or an app on your phone. And this really has a dramatic impact on the security of your online digital accounts. Last year, Community IT responded to a number of compromised accounts, but none of them had actually implemented multi-factor authentication. So we see it in the data from the organizations that we serve. And then organizations, Google has what they call Project Zero, which is their security research team, and they identify that the most common attacks that nonprofits are going to face, which are kind of these automated bot or bulk phishing attacks, multi-factor authentication is very effective in preventing those attacks from being successful, in terms of having your password be disclosed and then being used to log in and then target other users from your account. So multi-factor authentication, if you have not already implemented on all systems that you can log into from the internet, is something that should be high on your to-do list after coming out of this webinar. There's also some advanced email security protection that are available. As we showed some of the screenshots earlier, those messages are very hard for traditional anti-spam solutions to protect against. There's not much text in them. They're very short. They often, will not even have malicious links in them. So it is hard to block those with regular spam prevention tools. But there are some next generation tools that are able to combat those types of threats. So again, I think it's important for the IT perspective to make sure that you've got those security controls in place, make sure that you're doing training and implementing multi-factor authentication on your systems, and you'll be able to really provide some protection against accounts being compromised, which then often can then be pivoted into the more sophisticated financial attacks that Carole's talked about.
Yeah, I think we can review our learning objectives. So, and I think we've done great on time. We might have time for questions. I just will wrap up with saying that we discussed the cybersecurity landscape and the reasons of why nonprofits are particularly vulnerable and why now. We gave you some types of cybersecurity incidents, and I loved that example that Matt walked through. It's very clear to see how easy it happens. And then lastly, we gave you some great takeaways, some toolkits, IT tools, and financial tools to help prevent and detect fraudulent activity. And with about a minute, do we have any questions that we can answer?
Yep, thank you, Carole and Matt. It looks like we have time for just one question. Do you consider the Google Workspace to be secure?
Yes, I think that's a good question, because I think it helps to, I think the response is any platform can be used securely, or any platform can be used insecurely. So Google Workspace, I think, is a great platform. From a technical perspective, we're not concerned about, Google getting hacked, kind of on the back end, or anything like that. But it's important to use the Google Workspace securely. And so that would mean turning on multi-factor authentication. So any account that logs in should have multi-factor authentication. And then your organization should also have pretty clear policies and practices around how you are saving and sharing data. So again, being clear that maybe data for the finance department is only available to organizational users and cannot be shared outside the organization. Maybe same thing with HR data. And then I think it's also important to incorporate your organization's backup and disaster recovery plan as part of it. So again, understand your data retention requirements and make sure that you are able to meet them in the platform. So again, any platform can be used securely, and any platform can be used insecurely as well. So as long as you are taking that deliberate planning approach, turning on multi-factor authentication, regularly getting rid of departed staff accounts, making sure the data can't be shared unintentionally, then you can feel confident in that platform and know that it'll be secure.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Matt and Carole. This workshop has now come to a close. All attendees will receive the recording and materials from this workshop via email by the end of the day tomorrow. Thank you so much for participating. And again, thank you, Carole and Matt, for educating our community.
Great.
Thank you.
It's great to join.